In this video, we're going to be going over some of the main features that EC2 instances offer. And once again, EC2 instances are those very customizable, highly configurable virtual computing environments. Let's go to our AWS dashboard to see exactly what those look like. In your AWS dashboard, let's click Services at the very top, and then EC2 near the very top of the menu there. This is the EC2 dashboard, and there's a bunch of really good information on this dashboard, specifically pertaining to instances, images, which we'll get into later, Elastic Block Store, network and security, and so on, as well as the status of every availability zone inside whatever region you happen to be operating in, which, once again for me, is North Virginia. What we're looking for now, though, is running instances near the very top of the page. So if we click on this will bring us to the Running Instances dashboard, and that's exactly what it sounds like, which is, for me, any instance that's running in the region of North Virginia. Right now you see just one running instance, and if I expand this name just a little bit, you'll see that it's a randomly generated name that has to do with Cloud9, which means this is the instance that's hosting our Cloud9 environment that we created near the beginning of this course. You'll see that the default view for EC2 instances shows you a lot of really useful information, including the name, instance ID, instance type, and plenty others. And if you want to get more into detail than that, you can always click the settings button up here to hide or show any information you want about these instances. For now, though, let's expand the bottom section a little bit and go over some of this instance information. In the first tab, the Description tab, we have just a whole lot of information pertaining to instances, and I do want to spend some time talking about some of these. We have the instance ID and the instance type. We also have a section for Elastic IPs, and we'll get more into these in the future, but for now, just know that an Elastic IP is a public IP address that you can allocate and assign to an EC2 instance if you wanted to have a permanent public routable IP address. The availability zone is, of course, the availability zone that the EC2 instance is deployed into. When you deploy an instance, you can configure which availability zone it goes into, but Cloud9 does all of that behind the scenes for us, so we didn't have to worry about it in this case. Security groups is any security group that the EC2 instance is attached to. In this case, it looks like it's attached to one security group that was created by Cloud9. Now, if you were to click on View Inbound Rules, you can see any inbound rules attached to that security group. So for example, in this case, we have port 22 open on TCP protocol to these two IP ranges. For view outbound rules, you'll see that all outbound traffic is allowed. The AMI ID is something we'll get into in a little bit more detail later on, but for now just know that it's the machine image ID that was used to create this instance. So because this instance is running Amazon Linux as its operating system, the AMI ID is the AMI ID of Amazon Linux. It looks like the instance was deployed by Cloud9 into a public subnet, so it does have a public domain name. And then just like any other instance that you create, it also has private DNS, so a private domain name and then a private IP address. And then finally, the last two things I want to talk about right now are the VPC ID and the subnet ID, which of course are the VPC that the instance is deployed into, and then also the subnet that the instance is deployed into. Oh, and you know what? There's actually one more thing I want to cover, and that's the block device, and that's the EBS volume that's attached to the instance. So in this case, if we were to click on this, we'd see a little bit more information about the EBS, which of course is the Elastic Block Store that's attached to the instance to give it persistent storage. Next is the AMI, or Amazon Machine Image, which is a pre-configured template for instances. Now, we touched on this just a little bit when going over our Cloud9 instance, but let's go into a little bit more detail now. In your EC2 dashboard, if you were to click on AMIs on the left side, you'll see that it's empty right now. And what that means is that we haven't created any of our own AMIs, which is something you can do with something called an EBS snapshot. And we'll get more into that later on. But for now, let's take a look at the AMIs that are available to us when we want to launch a new instance. So let's click on Instances again, and then Launch Instance. And the very first page you see when you click Launch Instance is the AMI page. And once again, these are the machine images that you can use to model your EC2 instance after. Our Cloud9 instance was modeled on Amazon 2 Linux, so this is the AMI ID that was used for our Cloud9 instance. There are plenty of others, including many that are free tier eligible, but you can get all kinds of really useful AMIs from this marketplace. Ones that are Windows installed, ones for different web application frameworks like the LAMP stack for PHP or Python, or any number of AMIs. If you click on AWS Marketplace on the left side of the page and browse through here, then you'll find plenty of really useful AMIs for your use in the future. There's also My AMIs, which are of course AMIs that you've created for your own future use, and we don't have any of those right now. If you want to create your own AMIs, it's really simple to do that. So back on the EC2 dashboard, let's find the Elastic Block Store section, and then real quick, let's click on Snapshots. So you'll see we don't have any snapshots here, but if we did, we could select one, click Actions, and then click Create Image. And it's really as simple as that. It'll create an Amazon machine image from that snapshot that you can use to deploy your instances later on. To create a snapshot though, you can either click Create Snapshot on this page, or if you're like me, you prefer to go right to your volumes, which are your EBS volumes, and then select the volume, click Actions, and click Create Snapshot here. And back to our EC2 features. Next up is key pairs or secure login credentials. Now, for now, just know that they're credentials you can use to log into your EC2 instances. And very shortly here in another video, we'll go over exactly how to create those and to use them to get connected with your instance. Next up are regions and availability zones, which once again are a way to not only organize your EC2 instances, but to make sure that they're fault tolerant and highly available. So let's go back to our instance dashboard. Of course, we know that because we're in the North Virginia region, this instance and any instance listed here belong to the North Virginia region. And of course, the availability zone that this instance is deployed to is the US East 1E availability zone. Next on our list of EC2 features is security groups. So back on our instance dashboard, we touched on this earlier, so we already know that security groups are ways to control access, both incoming and outgoing for EC2 instances by port and IP range. So once again, we see that the one security group that this instance is attached to is a security group that was created by Cloud9. And it has both a set of inbound rules and a set of outbound rules. In another video shortly here, we'll practice creating security groups of our own and configuring them as well. Back to our list of features, we have Elastic IP. So once again, Elastic IP addresses are addresses that you can allocate and assign to EC2 instances. So let's do that now. On your EC2 dashboard, on the left side of the page under Network and Security, we can click Elastic IPs, and you'll see that right now we don't have any. So before I click Allocate New Address, one thing you should know is that you don't pay anything for Elastic IPs that are attached to an EC2 instance, or any other instance or resource. The only time you pay for an Elastic IP address is if it isn't connected to something. With that being said, let's click Allocate New Address, and then once again Allocate, and you'll see that it's given us an Elastic IP. The next step here is to select the IP address, click Actions, and Associate Address. And what it's going to do here is give you a drop-down of instances to choose from. Of course, we only have one, so let's choose our Cloud9 instance to associate this IP address with. You'll also need to select a private IP address, and then you can click Associate. But before I do that, very quickly, you can also have the option to run a CLI command to do the same thing. It'll find the ID of the instance you want to associate and the private IP that you've chosen, and then if you ran this from the CLI, it would do the same thing. For now though, let's click Associate, and you'll see that it succeeded. So the next time we go to our instance dashboard, you'll see that there is a public IP address that's associated with the instance, and it's the one that we just allocated. Next up in our list of resources are tags, and let's see what those look like on the dashboard. So tags are a way to assign metadata to a resource. Not just EC2 instances, but a whole number of resources in AWS are taggable. In this case, let's go to the Tags tab and see what we have. You'll see right off the bat that we have a name tag, a couple of Cloud9 tags, and some CloudFormation tags. And CloudFormation is something we'll get into later on, but for now it looks like all of these tags were automatically created by Cloud9 when it created our environment for us. One thing you can do on your end, though, is for any EC2 instance, click Actions, Settings, and Add or Edit Tags. And then you can create any tag you need. Tags are a great way to organize and keep track of different parts of your EC2 metadata. And finally, in our list of resources, for now we have VPC, or Virtual Private Networks. Let's see what those look like. We have an entire module on VPCs later on in this course, so I'll touch on it lightly for now. But to sum it up, VPC enables you to launch AWS resources into a virtual network that you've defined. The virtual network closely resembles a traditional network that you'd operate in your own data center, with the benefits of using the scalable infrastructure of AWS. So on the instance dashboard, let's go back to the description tag for this instance. And once again, we'll see that the VPC that this instance is deployed to is here. And that about sums it up for this video. In this video, we covered EC2 basics, and if it all makes sense, then feel free to move on, and we'll configure our own EC2 instance.